Welcome back to another episode of the Dynasty Dingers podcast. It is Tuesday, May 27th. And yet again, new week, new guest. We have one of our better guests, Doc, right? This is going to be our little running shtick now, is how to one up last week. But this week we have James Anderson joining us from RotoWire. Very excited to have James on the show this week. Doc, I'll welcome you in and you can bring James on.
I'm glad to be here. I bit my tongue at dinner. It hurts. It hurts quite a bit. I chomped on it and it made a crunching sound. It's just the kind of high IQ thing, that you're going to get with it translates over to fantasy baseball analysis too. This cigar is not really letting that well. It's not really been like the best night. So to have James Anderson of RotoWire fame amongst us, it's going to be such a great podcast, folks. I'm excited to have you here, James, and your luscious locks. How are you doing?
Great, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so James, last week, and we're going to get to this later in the show, we were really lucky via Doc's ability to communicate and source to have Konnor Griffin's dad on. So we had a really good conversation, and it was interesting to hear from a father's perspective, someone who's raised a child, into now in the fantasy community where we like to speculate and look at numbers, and at times we forget the human element. So I'm excited today to kind of have those conversations and just see, beyond even the numbers at times, what you're looking for. But to start off today, we want to get into the human element. So first question we just had for you is, what led to your career in baseball? And ultimately, why did you choose RotoWire as your publication that you're currently working for?
Yeah, it's not that exciting of a story. I mean, a lot of luck went into it. I've got a journalism degree. So I, was working for publications and stuff like that. Started working for RotoWire just on the side when I was working for some restaurants just out of college, and just one thing led to another, and I just kind of moved up. And I'm actually from Madison, where RotoWire is headquartered. So I happened to move back and just kind of started going to the office more. And the baseball part, I just think it's I think it's by far the most interesting fantasy sport to analyze. I mean, I love the game of baseball, but I love, the game of basketball as well. I just think that baseball is it's another level from like football or basketball. When you start breaking it down, it's way more interesting to me. I think there's just way more to uncover. And I gravitated towards the prospect side of things when I was really kind of dialed into the baseball side at RotoWire, because we had so many good people that were doing like the big league stuff, like Derek Van Riper, Jeff Erickson, Clay Link. And I just really kind of carved out the prospect space and started doing the top 200 rankings, and I changed them to top 400 rankings. So yeah, I mean, there's nowhere I'd rather work than RotoWire to be able to do what I do. So just very lucky.
And did you go to UW-Madison, or did you go to college out of state, or just a different?
I went
college?
to University of Minnesota.
Minnesota. Oh, you're one of those, huh? It's okay. I live in Wisconsin. I'm from Wisconsin, so I say that with fun. I have family.
I mean, I'm not. I have very little allegiances to like the University of Minnesota. A lot of good memories up in Twin Cities, though.
Well, and Big Ten schools, I think I've heard nothing but great stories from Madison and Minnesota. Minnesota always surprises me because living in state, you hear the fun times, and I've had good times at Madison. I haven't been to Minnesota, but Big Ten schools always have such a great track record of enjoyment for the college years. You talked a little bit about kind of some of the bigger names that came out of RotoWire. That's always something that surprises me. When you look at your career, who do you lean on as someone that maybe was a mentor? You talked about DVR there a little bit, but that really helped you find your footing as a fantasy analyst.
Yeah, I mean, I think just so many like Derek and Clay were the ones that kind of gave me my first opportunity, but just more. I would say it's almost more from just all the podcasts and stuff that I took in, even before that, like Jason Parks, who used to work for Baseball Prospectus, is probably my favorite prospect writer of all time. He was probably the one, like his podcast with Kevin Goldstein from way back in the day, was that called Up and In? That one I've listened to probably every episode of that multiple times. And even before Jason Parks, I was a big Keith Law fan. So just kind of, they're not, it's not, I wouldn't even say like mentors, because I don't have like a relationship with those guys, but and just so many really good fantasy analysts like other than that, but just taking a lot of that in. That's kind of how I learned about enough to be able to evaluate prospects for fantasy. Like I don't consider myself a scout or anything like that. I'm more of a writer and a ranker of fantasy prospects than a scout, but I at least know enough about that side of things to do what I do.
Yeah, last question I have for you. Doc,
I just wanted to jump in real quick and just ask. So you said you were inspired by certain things. Were you grabbed by maybe the way they were crafting their words, or more so just the utilization of statistics? I'm very intrigued here. So it sounds like you didn't really have the scouting roots. Maybe you've developed some scouting ability just by osmosis. But yeah, would you say that was it more the stats or the journalism or the weaving of the two that kind of drew you in early on?
I would say I'm kind of just, I gravitate towards someone that's making a compelling case. Like I think what was so great about Jason Parks was he was giving really good analysis, but he was also really funny, but without trying to be funny. I don't try to be funny or anything like that, but that's what made it sort of so digestible as sort of someone that was just sort of getting into prospects. And I also I really respect people that are right about what they're talking about more often than not, like it's not like I'm not going to just keep listening to a podcast if the person's just wrong all the time,
Yeah. And that's an interesting thing, because what you're saying here, I'm always trying to be funny and people keep telling me you're not funny. So I have to dial that back and just try to be right more often. It's a whole thing. And so it is, but I mean, in all seriousness, it's like, I try not to sound like a douche these days, but I'm getting to the point where I've only been doing this for a few years in the prospect world. Really, I've only been on Twitter actually since 2023. And so now I'm able to go back and quote tweet from 2023 and be like, hey, look, but yeah, I think you have to do it to some extent, or maybe I feel like I have to do that to some extent. Like, hey, look, here is a case study of why you should continue paying attention. Not every single day, but every so often. Hey, guys, come on. What I'm talking about today may end up being true. Of course, it's good to occasionally acknowledge the faults too, and where you miss. But we're all gonna miss.
Yeah, and it's a totally different. Like when I first started, there was, I could just be right, and enough people would notice that I was right, that I wouldn't have to take that many victory laps. But now it's just so competitive. There's honestly 10 times as many good internet prospect evaluators now as there were 10 years ago. So it's just so much harder to kind of stand out. So I totally get taking a victory lap here and there, especially today.
Well, and if you're not attached to RotoWire, right? Because I think what I heard from what you're saying is you're right. There is more amateur scouting. There is more content creation. There are people trying to monetize Substack or any of the other opportunities where they can be paid for their knowledge or their write-ups. And Doc and I have this conversation a lot. It's interesting with prospecting, right? And I look at your top 100, top 400, I guess, and you look at some of the young names that you have on there, which we'll get to later. You're going to more than likely be correct about these players, but it may take a year and a half for us to see them at the big league level. And you may have to reference, hey, a year and a half ago, I had 5 players, I guess, with Griffin under the age of 20 that we had to wait on because of the current way that the prospectors are falling with age. And I think I've noticed with Doc too, the victory lap, it's almost like you said, Doc, necessary to remind people that, hey, what the strategy that I'm scouting is working properly, because all of us kind of look at things a little bit differently. And I think finding those correct accounts or those correct writers like yourself, James, it's really important. But with that being said, I think we can just kind of jump right into some of the players today. We haven't had the opportunity with our last few guests to really talk just ball, so I'm excited today. And I wanted to start right off with those players that I mentioned that you have in your newly released top 400. Is that correct?
That's right.
And when did you release that?
I released it Thursday.
Okay. So yeah, we're brand new. Doc and I were kind of talking about it before we jumped on today. I love the aggressiveness that you've shown, right? We have a lot of early excitement from Made, Pena. Walcott was someone that you obviously were very high on this offseason, and DeVries with stateside Konnor Griffin being in there as well. When you look at these 4 names, I guess we can add 5 being Griffin. What are you seeing for each profile that tells you they're worthy of a top 10 ranking right now?
Yeah, so I think with those guys, it's kind of, and I'll go back to like why I had Walcott 1 during the offseason. To me, like Walcott during the offseason, I thought he was the most likely prospect to someday be a first round pick in fantasy. And really the only prospect coming into the season that I thought had a very clear path to being a first round pick in fantasy. Like you could obviously see it with someone like Made, but just I really care about kind of crossing off some of those developmental checkpoints, and Walcott having just finished the year at high A. You had Made, you had DeVries. Those guys were mostly playing at the very lowest levels last year. So I just felt like Walcott had that superstar first round fantasy upside and had accomplished the most of those guys with that potential profile coming into the year. Now Made and Pena, that a lot of people expected Made to have success. I expected him to have success. Had him top 20 after never playing in a league besides the DSL, which is something I've never done before. I'm trying to think of like how high I've had someone who's only played in DSL games prior to Made. Might have been somebody in like kind of the fringe of the top 50, but just putting Made top 20 coming into the year was a really big vote of confidence, I thought, and then he's lived up to it. Pena, though, I was too low on coming into the year. The Dominican Summer League, I know he had the 190 ISO. I know he had the 583 slug, but just the one ball going over the fence. I wanted to see what he was going to do at the next stop before kind of buying into the power, the over the fence power being there, and especially being there, in his teens. I think sometimes we see guys like that get to the ACL, get to single A, and the approach maybe translates, and they're putting up like a mid 300s OBP, but there's not that much juice. And Pena was kind of exactly what the people highest on him this offseason sort of thought he was going to be. So I had to catch up on that ranking. Like I think he showed enough in those 25 games before the concussion that there's going to be, I think, at least 15 plus, maybe 20 homer power in there. And then obviously I think he already had demonstrated how good the hit tool and the speed was last year in the DSL. And then DeVries is just he's kind of the high floor, sort of safest of all these guys, I think. High ceiling too, but he's probably been, if you were just kind of grading all these guys based on how they've done this year, I think DeVries, it's really tough to find fault in what he's doing. Maybe I'd give Pena just as high of a grade because of how impressive it's been. for him to basically keep pace with Mate as a power hitter at single A this year. But the reason those 4 guys and Konnor Griffin are in the top 10 is because of the upside first and foremost. But I don't think there's, I think we get caught up on like upside and floor and ceiling. But when you're talking about 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds who are doing what these guys are doing at the levels they're doing it at, I think they also come with a pretty high floor, because these guys are all shortstops essentially. Maybe they move to third base, but maybe they move to second base. But like, these guys are going to provide value with the glove. They're the youngest guys in all the leagues they're playing in. They're producing. They're really athletic. Like, these are high floor players and they're high ceiling players. And I think the power speed hit tool with all 4, Griffin, I mean, the hit tool with him, I think it's just going to be fine. Obviously the strikeouts and walks are really tilted in one direction right now, but he's been so productive. He's so athletic. So I think these guys have a high floor, and I think they have among the highest ceilings in the minors, and that's why they're in the top 10.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about Konnor Griffin with his dad. We told him, his dad, that Konnor was just going to be a washout because the strikeout rate is unsustainable. No, he did not say that. No, huge Konnor Griffin fans here. And I was just like, man, if I'm him, I'm this athletic specimen, and I'm swinging a bunch, and I'm doing the damage that I'm doing. It's like, why would I want to take a walk? It's, of course, hopefully someone at some point steps in and is like, hey, at some point you're going to have to, but you'll cross that bridge, earn the promotion. Your Sebastian Walcott rank was like, I mentioned you by name eventually on some certain podcasts. I don't remember how many times, but early on, I was not sure about it. I was like, oh, that's pretty bold. You were the one who kind of woke me up to like, oh, we're entering a new prospect era. And I think, I'm not sure. I haven't done a prospect ranking. I've kind of been focusing on MLB this year, but I haven't done a prospect ranking since December now. I'm due. My wife and kids are going away for a week soon, so I'm going to get it done. And for the first time in a long time, I don't feel pressure for there to be like a consensus top 10. I mean, I always kind of have fun bucking it anyway, but again, only if deserved. I don't do, I can be silly, but at the end of the day, like you said, people aren't going to listen to you if you're wrong all the time, if you're just like trying to get clicks. So if it's bold, it's because I believe in it. And I think now it's like, it's time to be bold, or it's more freeing than ever before, because there's so many graduations. We're going to be seeing Roman Anthony off this list, relatively soon. Nick Kurtz, see ya. Hopefully this injury is not a big deal. A lot of names going to be off here. Painter by the end of the year, probably. So it's like, yeah, it's a new Matt Shaw, new generations here. And Walcott, I went from like, I never said it was bad. I was just impressed. I'm like, dang, this guy believes in it. And I'm like, and I think maybe, I know what I fell into, and maybe others did. I think we all thought Sebastian Walcott was at least 20, and maybe it's not a big deal, but being a teenager and being at AA and doing what he was doing, it's like, oh my gosh, like, we really are not giving him enough credit. And that's why it's so impressive to me. And so if I had to ask you, because I like poking holes, I did this with Jackson Holiday. Sometimes these prospects will reach such a level of like, oh, of course, like they're so amazing, like they're so good, there's such a high ceiling. We have to poke holes, I feel. And so I'll ask you a couple things. One, Fangraphs gives him a 45 speed rating, and he's pretty big-bodied. I mean, I guess I'll ask you, and this is a kind of a scout question. Do you think he's going to fill out? Do you think the steals will hold up? And also, are you concerned at all about the contact rate?
So with the speed, I definitely don't agree with the 45 there. He's tall, he's 6'4", but I don't think he's got like wide hips or overly wide shoulders. Like, he's an impressive guy, but he's kind of built like a wide receiver to me. He's not built like a tight end. So I think he's going to run just fine. I mean, I think he's going to want to run. He's attempted 10 steals in 41 games this year, attempted 35 steals in 121 games last year. So, like, I don't think he has I don't think he's going to be Ellie De La Cruz or Ronald Acuna as a base stealer, but I think he's going to be kind of along the lines of Fernando Tatis in that department.
James, I wanted to circle back because I have a question. Being from Wisconsin, I'm biased with Brewer prospects, so this crop is just fascinating to me. And I did not think Pena was going to have this kind of a start. I fell in line with kind of the mindset that you said with some of the naysayers. I just assumed the contact approach would show some holes with the Mudcats once they placed him there. So to see the film that we're seeing, which is he's a bigger body than I expected. The mechanics look good. The walk to strikeout's great. I mean, everything looks great. So my question for you is there a chance by the end of September we are seeing Pena leapfrog Made as an industry, as a consensus, as the Brewers' number one prospect?
Yeah, I think you'd have to say there are. I mean, if I'm going to put them both in my top 10 in May, then I think you have to say there's a chance that the guy who's in second is in first by September. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like necessarily. I think, if we get to the point where Pena has clearly put together a better power season than Made at single A, then I think you'd have to consider it, especially if the hard hit data and the home run totals both go in Pena's favor. Then I think you'd have to consider it because they're not that dissimilar in terms of physique. I do think Made has a bit more explosive actions with his swing, just his general movements. He just kind of seems more explosive to me, even though I think Pena's the better straight line runner. But yeah, I mean, if they're this close right now, I know there's some people that don't think they're this close right now. Some people were surprised by where I moved Made. A lot of that was probably just based on where I had Made before the last update. But yeah, I mean, we could get to a point in September where everything is a check mark in Pena's column. So at that point, it would be tough to keep having Made ahead. But I think it would be more like one guy being ranked third and the other guy being ranked fourth or fifth, that type of thing.
Okay.
It doesn't seem to me like you care at all about industry consensus. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I love it, man. Yeah, I love it. It's one word. Yeah, I mean, Ross. I think you have to be. Again, it's not 4 clicks. It's like if you want to do an industry consensus, then just go tally them up and do an average, right? I'm sure. I know I've seen you and Ross the Boss Jensen do a couple podcasts at least, and yeah, he's very. I think I would actually I like Ross, we're buddies, but I'd call him out and say sometimes he does it just to stick a finger in someone's eye a little bit. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. But I love that both of you are very fearless like that, and you have to be. It's a good list. I have some questions for you as we move on here, but I know Matt has got his own as well. So it's gonna be fun because I got some comments about Namala. I'm excited to talk about Namala.
Yeah, when we were going over the list today, James, Namala was the one that we were both like, okay, we love everything. And then I read out Namala's name and I was like, well, he is unbelievable right now. And just because I disliked him, we shouldn't hold the bias. We'll get to that in a minute. I'm really curious to bring this one up to you because you've been doing this for a long enough time that I think you've seen enough of these profiles come and go. And I was having a conversation this week with a really good friend, and we were debating over Anthony and Cruz. And the real conversation was around trade pieces and trade packages. And my buddy said, well, I think Cruz has similar trade value, right? League context, all of that's important. But really, we're just going to strip it down to these two as fantasy players as Roman Anthony. And I scoffed. I said, that's ridiculous. But it's easy to say that when Cruz is struggling at the big leagues, has had some really nice games, is fresh on the IL, and Anthony is holding his own at AAA. So I wanted to ask you, when you're evaluating Roman Anthony, your number one prospect now, compared to a Dylan Cruz who's recently graduated the prospect ranks, Do you see similar value in those two players, or has Roman Anthony always had a higher ceiling for you? Or maybe it's the opposite.
So the only time I ever had Dylan Cruz in my top 5 was on the very first update, July 24th, 2023, after he got drafted. And he was never in my top 5 again until he just graduated on the last update. So I've never had Cruz, other than when he first got drafted, ranked in that area that I've had Anthony ranked for over a year. So I don't view them as, or I don't view the sort of AA, AAA version of Cruz and the AA, AAA version of Roman Anthony as comparable. I just think it's a tier up for Anthony. Like, he's just better basically at everything except for stealing bases. And part of the edge Cruz gets in terms of stealing bases is because of the team context of Washington running a ton. So like average, OBP, power, floor, ceiling, like all of that's Anthony over Cruz to me.
And it's interesting. I kind of wanted to follow that up, and I don't think I have this written on our outline, but it's another conversation Doc and I are really starting to have more and talk about in the show, which is just prep bats coming out of FYPDs, or even the Major League Baseball draft, in compared to the collegiate bats. And there was so much excitement for Cruz, and he just, as you kind of mentioned with your rankings, just didn't live up to that right away, and still hasn't really scratched the surface outside of low A when he made that great debut, right? And then fell off upon each promotion. When you're looking at your own leagues, are you more inclined to shoot for the prep bats, the high schoolers in your FYPD, or do you still take a look at the collegiate bats, a Cruz, a Langford, and look at the polish? Like, where do you stand with your approach?
Yeah, it's not going to be that satisfactory of an answer, but it's really just, I kind of do the work and trying to order my rankings for the FYPD class, and like best player available. I did a FYP this past year where I took Weatherholt in the first round and Theo Gillen in the second round. So college bat, prep bat, just kind of where I think they belong to go. I think in hindsight, I probably should have taken Konnor Griffin over JJ Weatherholt. That was something I wrestled with at the time. But then it's also sort of like FYPD, the way the drafts kind of roll. It's sort of like I expect I'm going to get maybe like a college arm I really like, or a prep sleeper hitter I really like in this round, so maybe I'll try to take a safer guy here if I'm not in love with the guy. But like I said, I should have taken Konnor Griffin there. So yeah, I think it's just kind of depends on the player. I definitely, like, I don't really trust like Wyatt Langford. I really loved coming out as a college bat, but I don't trust college numbers 100% until those guys get into pro ball. There's just kind of like Charlie Condon, kind of a prime example of a guy that I had ranked very high, and then as soon as he got into pro ball, I was just like, nope, like not into this anymore. So yeah, it's really player by player. I mean, I think you're probably more likely to, like, the guys I love the most are the guys that I just think are undervalued that you can get like the second or third round. We're usually on the same guys in the first round, and maybe your team's competitive window might dictate if you go prep or college. Whether you're looking to trade the guy or hold the guy might depend if you go prep or college. But I really just kind of have my favorite players from both subsets, and then just take whoever I think is the best available.
Yeah, and then it's like it's an interesting thing, what you just said about walking the line between being too reactive and being able to change your mind, and acknowledge, like, oh yeah, what we thought is not correct. And because I remember when Condon was struggling at first, there was a big wave of talking point. The talking point was we can't be too. I got elephants above me. Those are children. I'm not sure if that's coming through or not. But the Charlie Condon was like, oh well, we can't. Of course, we can't overreact. We don't want to push him too far. And it's like now we're looking at rankings. I can see your rankings here. You got Brady Montgomery, you got Bryce Rayner, you got pretty much a ton of guys ahead of Condon now. I don't know, actually, and it's interesting how what time can do, right? And I mean, frankly, Travis Bazana, it was like inconceivable, and hey, his future could still be very bright, but it was previously inconceivable to even put even a surging Nick Kurtz above him. We still didn't really want to do that near the end of the off season. But here we are, and Jack Kaggs, who went from like this, he's everyone's favorite guy now. And so I guess maybe I'll turn that into a question somehow, and I'll say, is that a thing for you? When it sounds like you knew it when you saw it. How fast was the turnaround for Condon, I guess, for example?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like the first, like whatever the first sort of pro sample we get, to me that's almost more important than anything they did in college, just because I know the context, I know the league, I know the pitchers, like I know exactly what's happening in these games. Like I don't know exactly if everyone's using what type of bats they're using, what type of balls they're using, whether they know what pitches come in, like in college. Like I don't know all that stuff. And so like if you're a premium college hitter from like the SEC and you are overmatched at high A in a hitter friendly league, like that's just a massive red flag to me. And I think you like for me, like I'm very quick to sort of pivot, especially on FYPD guys, because like on this update, so I do my first update before Memorial Day every year. So I haven't updated anything since the start of the minor league season until then. Like that sample size for all these guys, maybe not Condon because he'd only played in a few rehab games, but like that sample size basically just doubled all those guys' pro samples, or that's the only pro sample they have. Like a lot of these guys are prep hitters who didn't play at all after signing. So, like I didn't really love Caleb Bonnemer. I had him ranked on my top 400, but based off what Bonnemer did in the first 7 weeks of the minor league season, he's now in my top 100. Like I just think you have to look at like this is pretty much all we have on these players. Once you're in pro ball and you've played like 40, 50 games, to me, like just throw out everything you did before you signed. And I think that's just the best way to go about analyzing these FYPDs, especially for fantasy.
I think it's fun. You mentioned Theo Gillen, who was one of my targets in a number of my FYPDs. People were raving about the prep bat, thought there was a really good projectable future for him. Came out, if I remember correctly, it was about 30 at-bats, did not perform well in his very small sample last year. Fast forward to this year, things look great, right? We may see a guy that's rising fast. You mentioned Bonnemer. I kind of threw this into the outline for you, but we know of Payne with the Mudcats because of the Brewers prospects down there. You mentioned Bonnemer. Are there any other prep bats that you saw from the 2024 class that aren't getting talked about enough and are rising in your ranks?
Yeah, well, I'll also use that as an opportunity to plug RotoWire.com, YouTube 15 if you want 15% off a subscription to check out these ranks. But I do have this cool tool where you can go to the top 400 and you can isolate. You can just click only FYPD. You can isolate just FYPD players. That'll be especially helpful after the draft in July when I'm adding 65 prospects that a lot of people haven't even heard of. You can just exclude the FYPD guys if you don't want to see those players when you're trying to pick people up in your Fantrax leagues. But prep guys on the rise, Tyson Lewis with the Reds. he's kind of a man of mystery just because we've got these crazy EVs he's posted. I think 119, a couple others above 110 so far in the Arizona Complex League. Obviously a good athlete, just based off, I mean, that we knew Tyson Lewis was a good athlete coming into the year, but he is still 19. He's in the ACL, but I just think the upside is kind of clearly there. I think there's downside too. There's a reason he's still in complex ball. Luke Dickerson, who I think he's definitely done enough to kind of be in this conversation. I have him slightly behind Lewis and a couple dozen spots behind Bonnemer, but Dickerson's in that mix. And then, Slade Caldwell was someone I was high on before the year. I think he's still very intriguing. It's tough to say whether a guy's just passive or if they know the zone really well when they're having success and also not swinging that much. But Caldwell has a ton of speed, so I think he's at least worth betting on. So there's a few guys.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I wanted to just highlight a few of those names because, we've had such a great start to the minor league season with Kurtz having the promotion, finally playing well at the major league level now for the A's. We have Caglione doing crazy things for the Royals, getting really excited about, and obviously Bazana down with the oblique. We're gonna have to wait and see. It could be a couple months now, right? 8 to 10 weeks is what I heard. So it's time to start seeing some of the prep bats and what they're doing. You mentioned Arizona having a nice pick there. I think that'll be fun to watch that transformation. Doc, I wanted to kind of pass it off to you and have that Arjent Namala conversation if you're ready for it.
Yeah, it's just he's an interesting guy. He doesn't seem like he's built for power. And so part of me wonders, and this is not me like saying anything concrete, how sustainable is this? Is he swinging out of his shoes to get to this power? Of course, it doesn't seem like that's the case because, well, his strikeout rate from last year is way down from 31% to 18%. The contact rate's up. Is this just a guy who is discovering that pedigree that caused the Jays to draft him? And I guess to add on to that, though, some of the guys, you have him above Bryce Eldridge. Let's just say that. So, and Matt Shaw. So what are you seeing? Because for me, I see in Bryce Eldridge a 40 home run kind of guy, might not even be a ratio drag, and he seems like he's got some good proximity. So what are you seeing with Namala that's prompting you to put him ahead of Bryce Eldridge?
I mean, a lot. It's obviously very different physiques. I mean, I love Eldridge too. I definitely not down on Eldridge. And
it's important to say that because it's funny. I took flack, and hey, Brock Wilken having a heck of a year, by the way. But I put Brock Wilken ahead of Dylan Cruz coming out of that draft, like just by one slot. I had them like right behind, and then but the outrage, wow, you hate Cruz. I'm like, well, he's right there. No, like I didn't drop him out. So I'm not sitting here saying there is disrespect to Eldridge here, but I am curious on your methodology.
So with Namala, like I think we're seeing a guy really just getting better week by week, and that it kind of like it all started last year. He gets after that rough start at single A, gets sent back to complex. Then he comes back to single A, and he's, I know he finishes with a 31% strikeout rate at single A last year. He was in the mid-20s to finish the year, which is still pretty good for an 18-year-old with a 245 ISO, 18-year-old no doubt shortstop with a 245 ISO at single A. And then he gets to high A, and he's still one of the youngest guys in the league. Probably would be the youngest shortstop at high A, if not for Leo DeVries. And like you said, he's continued to get better. Like he gets that jump in competition, and the strikeout rate comes down, and the walk rate goes up, and he's hitting for even more power. And he's in Vancouver. So it's just tough to see how this goes wrong. Just getting a shortstop who's one of the youngest players in his league and is one of the best power hitters in his league. It's just you don't find that very often. So the biggest knock I have on Namala is he's not gonna provide the type of stolen bases that I like to get out of my middle infielders. But if you're getting 30 plus homers every year out of your shortstop in his prime, that gives you some license to maybe take a little bit of a power hit somewhere else in the name of speed. So I'd prefer my shortstop to be a 20 plus steal guy, but I haven't been this confident about a young power hitting shortstop kind of actualizing in a while than I have Namala.
It is interesting when the Jays took Namala. It was, to me, it was a dart throw. It was like, this could go really, really, really well, or this could go poorly. When we see this with sometimes the more aggressive athletes taken with the projectable frame and bat. And when he had those struggles last year, I just leaned on history and kind of laughed and said, well, we know now, like, we know which bucket this is going to fall in. And then to follow him this year, incredibly impressive to see him make the strides that he has. And you said it, do it in Vancouver, right? We're talking about a very cold climate, and which usually saps power. And it hasn't been the case for him. How much more projectability do you think is in the body? Because I know Doc kind of mentioned it. This was a small, skinny kid. I guess I shouldn't say small. Physically, he had a lot of development to take part being drafted. Do you think there's more to go? Still obviously a young age. And have you seen any physical differences from 24 to 25?
I think he's, I like his baseball body. Like he's, like 6'1", like he's 19. Like he's got strong forearms. He's got strong wrists. Like that's kind of all you need when you're that age and he's just going to naturally kind of keep slowly filling it out. And like, I don't want him to be this kind of like Addison Barger, just like, is he going to get a 80 game PED suspension tomorrow type of guy? Like I think he's just going to easily grow into that 6'1" frame. He's not going to sacrifice the movements in his swing. And really it's just kind of like, trust the video. Like these aren't cheapies. Like he gets a hold of them. The bat speed is insane. I mean, that's really what it is with Namala, it's the bat speed. So like it's a lot of the best players, a lot of the first round picks are guys that are 6 feet and under, and just not worried about it, man. Like I'm just not worried about the power at all.
Yeah. I wanted to kind of transition here. We're talking about so many of these young names, and the next two that I have are also younger, and maybe we can touch on that before we say goodbye today. But kind of transitioning to the LA Dodgers organization, the two biggest names, Zire Hope and Josue De Paula, having good starts to the season, right? And I think rising up ranks, right? They're well ranked in your newest release. What are you seeing from the two of them in profiles? Do you think the prospect community is correct with having so much excitement about both? And then secondly, do you think they actually play for LA, or do you think they end up as trade pieces?
Yeah, I had 4 Dodgers outfielders in my top 40, and that's not even including Dalton Rushing, because I also had Eduardo Quintero in my top 40, and Mike Sirota was the biggest riser on this last update. He
made your top 40?
He's at 40th overall now.
Oh, that's awesome.
So like the Dodgers just have this crazy quantity of outfield prospects. I love all of them. Like I obviously have it Depala, Hope, Quintero, Sirota, Rushing just sitting there in the middle. But yeah, I mean, Hope, it's kind of weird because Hope, if you had Hope standing next to Depala, I think most people would think Depala was the better athlete, but I think Hope's the better athlete and the better defender. But Depala, it's almost like Depala is just this fantasy DH guy that we're all just going to fall in love with, and I think he's going to produce in fantasy eventually. But I want to see Depala at AA. He's 96 games now at high A. He's got more walks and strikeouts in both years at high A, and he's still at high A, and he's probably a DH, but like he shouldn't be there anymore, as I hear hopes. I think maybe he's the guy they trade. Maybe they trade another one of those guys, but the part of the problem too is, so it's a logjam. Like the Dodgers have these great assets to trade, but the Dodgers also don't need that much. And some of these guys are just too good to trade for like a good reliever at the deadline, you know? So,
or we have the Yordan Alvarez situation again, right? Where,
well, they've played too much for the Dodgers to trade him at this point. So
yeah,
like that would be them
true.
trading Quintero like 2 years ago. But yeah, like the Yordan, the worst trade the Dodgers have ever made, basically. Well, yeah, I think they could trade for like an ace. They could trade for an ace at one of these deadlines and have one of those 4 outfielders be the centerpiece and still have 3 in their back pocket.
And that's what I was gonna ask you really, because that's what I've seen from the industry, and you cementing it, is Depala's future is probably at DH. We know Ohtani's the guy for the next decade, right? So that really makes things difficult for them. Whereas you're saying Hope is probably the better athlete. So at least they can utilize him in a rotation or have him in that outfield. So are you thinking the Depala might be the crown jewel of a trade package, or do they just try to find a bench bat in him? Like, it's a hard fit, right?
I mean, I think they're just trying to turn him into a capable left fielder.
Okay.
And that's why he's still at high A probably. It's just, you know, if you're an organization, they've given Depala aggressive assignments every year except for this year. Like, they obviously like the guy. They're proud of what they've done with him. I think they see that very high offensive ceiling. So they're not gonna just be like, well, Ohtani's our DH, no room for this guy, got to trade him. Because the fact that he's also probably a DH means that, you know, other teams are gonna maybe lowball you on his like pure market value. So I don't know who they trade, and honestly, like, it's just they've got so many pop-up prospects every year.
Yeah,
like they could get something done. I don't know who the best pitcher that's going to get dealt this year is going to be, but like they could probably get someone without trading any of these guys. So I don't know. It's frustrating. It's really challenging from a ranking standpoint. Like I don't think it affects like Quintero that much, especially since he's the youngest. He's at single A. But yeah, you're going to have a situation where eventually a couple of these guys are going to be at AAA, and the big league outfield is going to be absolutely loaded.
And you know, Dodgers have gotten to this weird place where it's like yeah, you look at like the White Sox or the Pirates and hitting prospects, and you're like, gosh, can they develop them? Well, if they do, they're gonna get tons of playing time. It is the opposite, right? It's like, I trust that they can develop them. How long will we be sitting here for? You know, we can talk about a year and a half later, but some prospects get Michael Bushed, right? And it's you don't want that. It's frustrating, and frankly, it can actually not be catastrophic, but really damaging to like a 20 to 30 team window for competing. Like if you're like, okay, well, in 2025 or 2026, I'm getting this prospect to come up. That'll help. Then he'll take a year to develop, blah, 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 blah. But if that all gets pushed back like 2 years, like it can sometimes be, it can be a problem. And so I'm wondering if maybe with Depala, they're going to loan him out to the Lakers. Because I'm not sure if y'all are familiar, but Josue De Paula, you hear a name like that, maybe some of our listeners think, he's a DSL kid. And I mean, clearly there's some kind of lineage in a Hispanic name like that, with a Spanish name like that. But they are he is the cousin of Stephon Marbury and Sebastian Telfair. And that's a shout out to anyone who watched NBA basketball in the year 2000.
Also a reminder that Telfair was a disappointment.
Yeah. So I mean, I remember watching. I mean, I loved those Marbury KG T-Wolves teams, and Jeff Ponce from Baseball America told me about that connection a couple of years ago, and it definitely got me really excited about Depala. And then I was very confused when I found out that he was a likely DH, despite being related to NBA players.
Yeah, the nimble and agility just, I guess, missed that side of the family tree. No, Doc, it's a great point. And it kind of goes into, right? Like we were seeing a lot of that in baseball now with the Holiday family, Prince Fielder's kid signing with the Brewers. You know, not that he's a superstar prospect, but it's fun to see the bloodlines. But you guys both kind of brought up an interesting point, which is the Dodgers' track record. And I'm not by any means saying this. I kind of want to just bring it up and see what you think, James. Depala, Hope, Sirota, you talked about Quintero, like some really fun names to get excited about. But I guess I have to ask from the industry, like when was the last time we actually saw the Dodgers produce something really exciting? Rushing aside, because he's
Andy Pages. Andy Pages.
Pages is pretty good, right?
That's why, so Pages, to your point, like this is what I'd been saying this during the offseason. And that was part of the reason I thought they were going to play Pages so much this year, is because they've got this well-earned reputation of not being able to develop guys. A lot of the times they just trade guys before they get up, and then it's like, well, who didn't develop them? Like, but
yes,
you look at the guys that play regularly for them, the last few years included, it's almost solely been guys they either didn't develop or guys they developed a really long time ago.
It's a great point. I mean, Pages, if you look at the metrics, it's just like, it's probably not the future. I mean, he's serviceable. Looks like an MLB player by all means, but
I mean, he's been worth 1.7 wins already.
He's solid, but he's not necessarily in terms of like your crown jewel, your development testimonial.
He's an everyday player on a good team.
And Doc, I hear what you're saying, because that's my first thought too. But what I'm seeing is we have him overshadowed by Ohtani and Betts and Freeman, and even Rushing coming in. You know, you put Pages on the Pirates. Holy cow! O'Neal Cruz finally has a running mate here. But James, I think that's really interesting, because I was thinking of Gavin Lux. I was thinking of Ruiz, right? I was thinking of these guys that were top 10 prospects, and we thought these are potential future MLB All-Stars. And what we have is big leaguers, but it wasn't the big leaguers we thought we were getting. So that's really interesting to hear what you just said about Pages, because if they are playing him and showing the league, hey, we can develop, what that means for this next crop of Dodgers. Doc, does that change your opinion at all?
I mean, well, on one, Pages or the Dodgers?
Just Pages.
I mean, he's listen, this is one of those profiles where if you're playing with BA only, completely different profile. He's Alec Burleson style, you know, like just a solid ball player. Burleson, I don't want it if OBP's a category.
Probably I play in a lot of I play in a lot of batting average leagues. So
yes. So then we're speaking. So we're probably on the same page then. Pages. Hey, if you're in batting average only, which I like batting average, it's kind of old school. It's at the end of the day, you got to swing the bat. So again, and when I typically say things like, he's a good real life player, sometimes that's what I mean. You need and you know, for every Lars Nootbaar, you need an Alec Burleson. We're doing Cardinals translations for those in Middle America.
I mean, you look at Pages, right? You look at him at a full season, close to 30 home runs, close to 100 RBIs. Like, I get what you're saying, James, because for me, I like points leagues. That's my home. I play in everything else as well, but he's been a guy that you're kind of like, well, you know, if I need a third outfielder, worst case scenario, I can start Pages. But I think he gets overshadowed. This profile, you put him on the Brewers, one of the best Brewers. Put him on the Pirates, definitely the second best Pirate. So I think that's an interesting point, and he's still young. There's still a lot to develop there as well. Okay, kind of transitioning away from the Dodgers here. Last question I have for you before I let Doc rip. Sikura's back. That's Travis Sikora for the Washington Nationals. Had a really nice rehab assignment, put up some incredible numbers, but it was complex. Now back, I think, with a high A promotion, if I saw that correctly. My question for you, especially with your newly released rankings, do you look down the road as Sikora after the promotions of Painter and some of the other big names, Burns potentially, as maybe the next number one pitcher in minor league baseball and potential ace, or do you have a different profile for Sikora?
So Sikora's my 7th ranked pitcher, and everyone ahead of him will graduate in the next like 2 months, 3 months. So yeah, if everything just kind of plays out as expected, he will be my number 1 ranked pitching prospect. I don't think on the next update, I would assume one of Burns, Pena, still prospect eligible. My next update will be right after the draft. But yeah, he's definitely looking like a future number 1 overall pitching prospect for sure.
Does anybody in this class? I know Jamie Arnold. I haven't checked in about a month, so I'm sure I've completely missed everything going on in college. And then the young prep kids in California. Do any of them have a chance to pass Sikora post draft, or do you still think Sikora is better than everybody coming out of this class?
I'm gonna pass on that question just because I'm about to start all my draft prep and I haven't really done any yet. So
same, yeah, same.
I do tend to default to. I will tend to default to a guy like Sikora over just your sort of standard. Assuming it's not like a Skeens level guy, I would assume I'll have Sikora over the top. Yeah.
Okay, you said he's 7th ranked. Do you know off the top of your head who do you have 8th ranked? Who's right behind him in your ranks?
8th is Noah McLean, 9th is Jonah Tong.
Okay, interesting. 2 Mets.
Where's Thomas White?
10th.
Okay, that's the next best answer.
Breaks your heart a little bit there, Doc.
No, it's it was just funny. If you guys say Sikora one more, I feel like you made James say Sikora because you kept saying.
Isn't it Sikora?
You say it's Sikora, and I almost want to let you keep it. Yeah.
I should be 100% on those.
Wait. Okay, so I say Sikora. How is it said?
Sikora. So what happened was James was trying to be nice, because he's from Wisconsin, and so the first time he accidentally kind of mirrored you, and then after that he went back to Sikora the way it's supposed to be said. And so
I see what I'm doing. I'm adding the Y when the Y is silent. Is what you are saying?
Correct. It's a big deal.
Hey, listen, I'm me. I'm happy to have corrections. I will.
That's very offensive to the Polish or whatever that is.
At least James didn't have to sit through me and Colt Heath last year, the entirety of the year when I said Colt Heath every single time we talked about him.
I didn't even know you said that. I can't believe I let that slide.
I'll pass it to you. Sikora,
yeah, well, I was laughing over here, and when I was muted, Travis Sikora's. His rookie ball K9 is just a funny number. It's 25 K9. It was in 5 innings, but now he's in high A, 20 K9. Yeah, he's out of control. I mean, this is just a kid with. I mean, I just liked him from the get go. He's a good makeup, smart kid, and you just love the Texas fireballer idea out of a 6'6" frame with 230 pounds, and he intentionally makes his delivery like Nolan Ryan because he likes Nolan Ryan. But then you find out, that heater that can touch triple digits, which he's actually not really doing right now. Probably a good thing. Better to command it than to just try to flash. But he's got 3+ pitches. It turns out that the heater is actually not even the number 1 pitch. The splitter is pretty filthy. The slider is filthy. And the heater's it's also really good. And so the fact that he's still so young and early on in his development, it's exciting. And I think he's certainly number 1. He's a candidate to be a number 1 pitching prospect someday. And I think that'll be a lot of fun to see. I'm interested to hear the Jonah Tong. I actually like Jonah Tong. He's undersized. But oh goodness gracious. Who was it the other day? I was in the Prospects Live Discord, and someone was saying they liked someone else above Jonah Tong. Bet you I can find it if I just say words. Yeah, Gauge Jump. Sorry, goodness, I had 3 whiskeys. Should have been 2 whiskeys. But Gauge Jump. So I guess maybe that's a good point to turn off there. I like Tong, and I said, and someone in the Discord said, "Oh, Gauge Jump over Tong," and it's not even close to me. I think that's hyperbole. I called him out. I said, "Hey, Why is it not even close? And they kind of eventually said, okay, I guess it's close, but they were really big on Gage Jump. And so I would ask you, this is one of the buzziest prospect names right now, Gage Jump. Do you have any impressions on the kid?
Yeah, he's not far behind those guys. I've got him 17th, but only 21 spots behind Tong overall on the rankings. So 17th among pitching prospects. It's tricky because like I actually like a lot of A's pitching prospects. I like Jack Perkins even more than I like Gage Jump.
Does it frighten you to like so many A's pitching prospects?
It does, because I don't like where they currently pitch. I'm guessing I'm not going to like where they're going to eventually pitch. And I know that I like where Jonah Tong's going to eventually pitch, or at least I think he's going to pitch for the Mets, and I know I like Citi Field. I mean, I could see a case for Jump over Tong. I was lower on Tong coming into the year because of that lack of physicality. Like I thought he was a little bit light in the shorts, but it's just the fastball is just so insane right now with the movement, and it's tough to get past that strikeout rate at AA for Tong. But I mean, like I said, like Jump, I'll be doing my next update in a little less than 2 months, and Jump could easily be ahead of Tong on that one.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are stuck in 2023 with Jonah Tong. Like I'll still get people asking me, "Oh, how do you trust Tong with those command issues?" I'm like, well, it's not what it used to be. It's not 10 walks per 9. It's like it's still not great 4 or 5 walks per 9, but if you can make that kind of improvement, it kind of just shows, like, first of all, an intelligence and an ability to adapt. And I think we're kind of winding down the show here. I'll give you a little bit of runway. We've talked about some pretty buzzy prospects. Maybe it's time to flash the knowledge, the worthiness of RotoWire and James Anderson. Nate, give us a prospect or two that people aren't really talking about as much as they should be.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
Off the outline.
I'm never on the outline, dude. I don't know if you noticed. I'm the wild card.
Okay,
and I'll ask you this in the meantime, because just to give you a little bit of a bridge, you can tell me what's the deepest number of teams that you play with? Because I do a podcast sometimes with Tim Kanak, and by sometimes I mean he tricked me into doing every week with him. But Tim Kanak, he's like always on the deepest prospects. He does a maximum of 20 teams in a league. Do you do any 30 teamers, or do you stick closer to 20?
Yeah, I'm in only 20, and I think all my dynasty leagues are either 15 or 20.
We're gonna get you into a 30, man, because it's your talent is wasted, my friend. You'll find out some of these guys, some of these lower rostered guys are so fun.
I turn down invites to 30 team leagues every offseason.
I'm sure you do.
So,
yes.
They're surprising, James. They're surprisingly fun, and I
resisted.
I'm in a few with Doc, and it's all about just keeping the league together more than it actually is.
Well, so
starting a lineup.
So it's really it's not about like I would be in a 30 team league. I've cut all the leagues I want to cut, and I don't want to take any more on. So here's a under the radar prospect for you. I've got him ranked in my top 150, but I was able to pick him up in a lot of leagues. Probably long gone in these 30 teamers, and then probably a lot of the 20 teamers. But RJ Schreck of the Blue Jays, like, no one talks about him. I don't get why no one talks about him, but I mean, I guess I kind of do. He's older, but over his last 21 games, RJ Schreck has 8 homers. He's hitting 324, 419, 730 with a strikeout rate under 19%. And he's probably going to be strong side platoon by the Jays eventually, but I think he could still be a 25 homer strong side platoon bat. And I mean, he was basically kind of free in dynasty leagues a couple of weeks ago. Might not be anymore, but I mean, I love the combination of like clear, actualized game power, significant game power, how close he is to the big leagues. Very exciting. And TJ Nichols, Rays pitcher, I'll throw out as a pitcher. I love it whenever the Rays seem to have a potential breakout SP on their hands, and TJ Nichols is just inside my top 200 now. He's been dominant at high A, has almost a 13 K to 9 and a 1.7 walk per 9, and just love the lack of walks and the quantity of strikeouts. And yeah, there's a couple off the cuff ones for you.
That's great. That's great. And Shrek's got that name too. That's a power name. That'll do well. That'll do well if you get all the fans in the stands wearing Shrek faces or hats or something. Yeah, it's good for marketing. Blue Jays know what they're doing. Yeah. That's so. No, those are a couple of great names, and you know what, and sometimes these like really deep 30-man leagues, I like to do it. I'm part of a few leagues where we only do prospect ads in the off season, or if they debut in the season. Now you got pretty deep FYPDs, like between 8 to 10 rounds. So Shrek, like, I'm looking at him in one league. I cannot pick him up till the offseason. Now, where's he going to slot in? Makes an FYPD spicier. But man, this is.
I played in leagues like that too. That's fun to have those in the mix, just for, especially if you're in mostly like first come first serve leagues, so that if you're playing with some sickos, you can still get guys in the offseason.
Yeah, man, I got kids. It's hard, man.
I was going to say, we all have the buddies that work remote, and within 4 seconds of anything happening, they're already rostered. And then you look back in a few years and you're like, how did they put this together? And you're like, oh, that's right. They work at home and they have the opportunity every second to add. So yeah, I like that as well.
Man, James, I gotta tell you, man, it's been awesome having you on today. Matt, you're the host. How about you do this? That's just terrible. I want to just make stupid jokes and like tell James that he's wrong about things.
James, why don't you go ahead and plug RotoWire and what you've been doing lately? Obviously, we talked about the release of your top 400, but I want to give the floor to you before we say goodbye.
Well, yeah, really appreciate you guys having me on. Yeah, the top 400 was updated already, but honestly, half the value of the top 400 is syncing it with your leagues on Fantrax, on CBS, wherever you play. It'll immediately show you the highest ranked players that are free agents in your league, and YouTube 15, again, 15% off. And then I'll be having my, I do a mailbag article and podcast after each update. So that's going to be the podcast is going to be Wednesday, the 28th, and the article will be up Thursday, the 29th. And then the Dynasty rankings, top 450 to 500 players for Dynasty, those will be updated roughly in about a week from whenever you're listening to this.
Yeah, James, the RotoWire Prospect podcast I've listened to for a number of years that you do. It's just awesome. It's awesome work. I enjoy your mailbags. And I think anyone that just enjoys hearing deeper names, prospect names in general, should check it out. There's a lot of content out there right now. Doc and I do more conversational, but you do a really good job of just listing off the guys who to be mindful of, skill sets to really identify. So thank you for doing that. And for our listeners, make sure you check James's podcast out in the top 400. But thank you for coming on today, James. And, hopefully we can get you back maybe end of the season. We can talk about some of the names.
Absolutely. My pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.
Doc, take us out.
I'm your Huckleberry.
See you guys next week.